I'm knitting my Petula pullover by Isabella Kramer, and I realized while I was taking a look at the stitches on my sleeve that you can see here that I've gotten quite a ways down. I'm supposed to be doing a certain number of repeats based on the size, which being a busty gal, it's one of the larger sizes. But I realized as I'm looking at the stitch markers here that the distance between some of the stitch markers wasn't quite the same. These all look good through here, but then when I get to this red one, there's a gap between the red and the yellow. Let me zoom in. So there's a gap that's between the red and the yellow that's definitely not there for the next stitch or even the previous stitches if you take a look at the yellow to the pink. When I went back and I'm counting the stitches, I'm realizing there's supposed to be 6 rows between stitch markers, and this one, just based on counting, looks like it's 8. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can just leave it in place because you do knit the sleeve to a certain length, and it'll just be one of those quirky items about having a handmade sweater. And there's nothing, I don't want to say nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely no reason to rip back for this unless it really bugs you. And this is bugging me, and I also thought it was a good opportunity to take a video. So that's what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do here on camera is rip back the sleeve, show you how to pick up the stitches, and what you need to do about things you may encounter picking up stitches. The main thing is, a couple of tips, is this is knit in the round, obviously, because it's a sleeve and there's a faux seam on it. That you need to know first where the beginning of your round is when you rip this back, because this handy dandy stitch marker is not going to be available when you go to rip back. So a lot of the time I'll take a stitch marker, here's my stitch markers, and mark where the beginning of the seam is. The convenient thing about this is this has a faux seam, as I mentioned, and that's the beginning of the round, and therefore I've got a stitch that already tells me where the beginning of the round is. But I'm going to go ahead and put in a stitch marker anyways, because it will also prevent me from ripping back any further than that point. So I'm going to rip back all the way to this row. And why am I picking that row? Because it's kind of in the middle. It'll help me figure out where I've gone wrong with my row counts. It'll give me the opportunity to pick up stitches or tink back if I have to fix some problems. But overall, it just is where I think the best place would be to rip back to. The other thing is you will need a couple of tools. Your circular needles, once you rip these, once you pull off the stitches, it's going to be a little bit easier to pick up stitches using a smaller size needle. So if you're using an interchangeable set like I'm using, these are ChiaoGoo's, you could just simply switch out your needle size to a smaller needle. I also have some circular needles. These are 9-inch circular needles that I use for sock knitting. I have them in pairs or in triplets because when I get to heels and gussets, it's much easier to deal with the socks on 3 needles. So this will help me pick up everything in the round. And I don't remember what size these are. I think they're ones, but I couldn't swear to it. The other thing is I have these nice, and I picked these up in a shop up in Wisconsin somewhere, these nice Haya short DPNs, which in smaller circumference, this makes it much easier to pick up stitches. It also makes it easy to grab stitches that aren't quite cooperating. I'm having these on the side just in case I need them. But you don't need them. You can just get away with putting your current circulars on a smaller circular if you have an interchangeable set. If you have a fixed circular needle, you just pull out a smaller size needle, not necessarily diameter, to pick up the stitches. The other thing is to note is this is a really woolly wool, which makes it much easier to rip back. Superwash is also, there's nothing wrong with ripping them back. It just, you can drop stitches much easier. That's nothing to panic about. And I'll probably do a future video showing me ripping those back because I've done it on socks so many times. But this, if you're new to ripping things back, a woolly wool will be much more cooperative in keeping stitches so that you can pick them up easy. Any other tips that I want to give before I do this? The other thing is, don't have any, I would advise you not be in the car or have other things going on around you. I've yelled at my husband when I'm picking up stitches after I've ripped back, because which is not an unusual event, because I'm trying to focus on this. It does take extra focus, more than you do with knitting. You wouldn't think so necessarily, but you want to make sure that you've got the right number of stitches, which we'll get to in a second about counting the stitches. And then we'll also having a flat surface, not competing for space or light. Make sure you have good lighting, because if you'll notice, this is a dark yarn. Picking up stitches on this is going to be a little bit more difficult. If you have a light yarn, they're much easier to see, especially if you've got younger eyes, which I don't anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this video, ripping this back and picking up the stitches. You'll notice some edits just because you probably don't want to listen to me dither on about things, but I wanted to show it from beginning to end on how this works. So I'm going to, without further ado, take these off the needles. And it's relatively simple. You just take everything off, including the stitch markers. A lot of the time I'll just unscrew the interchangeables, but I didn't think to bring my my tools to unscrew. That was my fault. I'm using the new 360 cables for the ChiaoGoo, and what I've found is the connection point right here between the needle and the cable sticks a little bit, and when you have a woolly wool, it doesn't move as smoothly as I would like. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see a little bit more of what's going on here. There's my start around stitch marker. And I'm off the needles. Very scary. So one of the other pieces of advice I would do is, here's my yarn, is as you're ripping back, roll it back onto the yarn. I used a ball winder to get this yarn into a ball, and what I have done before without thinking about it is ripped, and then looked down and realized I had a huge tangle of yarn, and especially on the woolly wool, it can be a pain in the tuchus to unravel. So I've hit one of my stitch markers that I'm not using to do the start of the round, so I'm just going to remove that and just keep ripping back. Now I will say that if I had realized that a couple of rows had only gone by and that that I had screwed things up, could have tinked it back, but I've even found sometimes, especially on larger diameter, that it's just much easier to rip back. Ripping, and you'll see, let me zoom in a little bit. This is what I'm talking about with the woolly wool. You'll see that the stitches are standing up. You can easily pick those up with the needle as you're going along. Superwash yarn, a little bit more slippery and can cause problems. Okay, keep ripping. Zoom back out. Okay, keep going, keep going. There's another stitch marker. And those, I leave those in a lot of the time because sometimes I'll get to ripping and not realize I've gone too far. Let me line those back onto my yarn. One of the other reasons why I like to wind it back onto the ball is I realize once I get all of this off of this ball like this, I realize then that I'm right back to where I started. I've now making forward progress at that point. Still ripping. Keeping an eye on the fact that this stitch marker is where I want to go back to. Taking this out. The other thing to keep in mind is when you make the decision to rip, realizing how far back. That's I don't get to knit every day. That's a couple of days worth of 1 or 2 hours here and there where I've ripped back, and I've done it in the matter of seconds here. And so, it's a choice of, can I live with it? And there, again, mistakes are what make the item what it needs to be. It's what makes it yours. It makes your item that you knit either for yourself or a loved one, or sometimes a complete stranger. It's what you want to make of the item. So this minor mistake, if I hadn't decided to make this video, I might not have even decided to rip back. Just keep moving forward, because in the grand scheme of things, you probably would have never noticed it. I would have noticed it, but 2 years from now, would I have even remembered I had done it? Probably not. Ripping, ripping, ripping. Okay, so here's that red stitch marker that I was saying there's too much distance between. Wind up. You saw how it got a little tangled earlier. Got to keep reminding myself to do that. All right, this is the red stitch marker. Take that off. And going back, that's at least one extra row right there. And that's why we have to rip it back a little bit further than that red marker, is because that was the one that there was just a little bit too much, too many rows between the two stitch markers. Am I back to my, yep, okay. Oh wait, nope, one more row. I caught, this is a woolly wool, so it caught the strands there. And so now I'm back to my stitch marker, and that's why it's important to have that one there, because zoom in, you can see where that saved that loop for me, so that it keeps me from pulling it any further back. So wrap up a little bit more of this wool so it doesn't get tangled up, giving myself some slack so that it's not bouncing around while I'm picking up these stitches, but it's also not in my way. Oop, zoom back out again. There we go. All right, give myself a little bit of slack here. And so I now am back to my yellow marker. I'm going to leave this in for the time being so I don't accidentally pull things out. As I showed earlier, this because this is a sticky wool, it has really good stitch definition after you've pulled out. So you've got all these live stitches that you need to grab. So we're going to start grabbing those. I'm going to use my 9-inch circulars. Okay. And I'm just going to pick up the stitch. I'm not going to worry about whether or not I'm picking it up in the right direction. Most of these I can do that fairly easily, but I can't always see which one's the right direction because this is a dark stitch. This is a dark yarn. So I'm just going to pick these up the best I can, get them onto the needles, and then when we start knitting in the round again, I'll show you how to fix that. In fact, some of these I'm purposely picking up with the wrong leg in front. Okay, can you guys see that? So you just grab it. Sometimes I've seen people who have said, put your fingers on the stitches like this, and then you just weave through. That's a good tip on a superwash because it can slip. You'll get a run on it, and you'll have stitches get dropped, and that's not a big deal. It's just like dealing with a drop stitch on any yarn project. And if I end up with one, I'll show you. If not, I'll make one and I'll show you how to fix it. So we're getting to the end of this 9-inch, and so because we don't want to put too many stitches on it, we're gonna flip the sweater arm a little bit so that I can get into it, and then we're gonna pick up with another 9-inch. We're gonna pick up another set of stitches. Keep wanting to pull this to myself so I can see easier, but I want you guys to get a good view of it on the camera. Hopefully you can see around my sausage fingers. Okay, we're getting to another place where we're curving, so we're just going to turn this. I still got plenty of room on the circular needles. Get this centered again. Keep going. Oops. And if you look, zoom out a little bit, you look, I've got plenty of stitches on this needle, so I want to turn, and actually I just need one more needle, 9-inch circular. I'm going to pick these up. Sorry, I was coughing. I'm going to pick these up. And here's my last stitch again with that yellow stitch marker. I could have started off with that, but this is actually technically the end of the previous round. So I just wanted to get everything in place. Now, one of the other important things is I just picked up a bunch of stitches, but I have no idea how many I have on the needles. So I know that when I started off my sleeve stitch, get these situated, when I started off my sleeve stitch stitching, that I had 92 stitches on this sleeve. When I started decreasing, I marked everywhere where I put a 2-stitch decrease in the round. So each one of these represents -2 of that 92. Now I'm questioning whether I had 92. So this should be 90, 88, 86, 84. Is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 stitches from 92, that's 84. So I should have 84 stitches on the needles, so I need to count. Normally the way I do that is just count off on 20s and then just count how many are left, because you should be fairly close. It's just missing a couple of stitches. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and 20, and 2, and 4. So I have 84. That's good news. So the next step is to get them onto my regular needles. So I'm back to my circular needles. And so you have to have, when you're doing this, this is where you can correct, you can either start knitting right now, or you can get them onto your circular needles. I prefer to go ahead and get them on the circular needles so I'm back in position and feeling good about myself. So the first thing is you need to make sure that your stitches are on the right orientation. And what does that mean? This right hand stitch, and let me zoom in. A little bit more. Perfect. Okay, so this right hand stitch here, this right hand leg needs to be in the front, and it is. So I'm going to pick this one up. This next one, the right hand leg is in the back. Can you see that? Right there? So all I have to do is peck that up and twist it, or when I'm going to knit the round, I'll knit through the back loop, and that will straighten out the stitch. Okay? And I'm going to find ones that get twisted weird, and as you're knitting the round back, that you're going to fix it as you go along. So this one, a little hard to tell because this is actually where my decrease happened, but that is the right leg and it is in the front. So I'm going to pick that up. Again, this one, right leg in the front, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, and you'll see it right away whether it's twisted. See this one right away, I know, because I'm not picking this up like I did the first one, where the front is right in front of me. The front is actually to the left. So I'm gonna twist it back on, okay? You don't have to do this. Again, if you're stitching here, and I can do a quick demonstration of it. If you're stitching, you can just knit through the back loop here and bring it through, and it will reorient the stitch properly. But you do want to fix it because otherwise you're going to have twisted stitches. And see, my stitch is already straightened. And just pick it up. This one is twisted. Pick it up. You could even pick it up through the back loop and it straightens it out. This one straight. This one is straight. This one's straight. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. This one's twisted, so I can just grab it through the back loop like that and straighten it out. And in fact, I just figured that out while I'm on camera. Okay, straight one, straight one, straight one, straight, 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 straight. We're good. And we're almost to the end of our first needle, which is good news. All right, this one's twisted, so we'll pick this up through the back loop. Pick this one up through the back loop. And there we go. We're out of the first circular, and we've got 2 more to go. So, turn this. Get this zoomed back in again. Get you back on camera here. And just pick up, pick up, pick up. And I'm not seeing anywhere where I dropped a stitch, which is good. This one is twisted, so we're going to pick it up through the back loop. Again, twisted, so pick it up through the back loop. Pick it up through the back loop, it's twisted, twisted, twisted. I had quite a few of these twisted here. And if you discover while you're knitting that you've got a twisted stitch, again, you just stitch it through the back loop and it'll straighten it out. You don't have to straighten it out like I'm doing it here. I just find it much more easy to deal with. All right, twisting again. We're not quite through this second circular needle, and I've managed to stab it through the sweater. So twist, this one's straight, twist, 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 twist. I think I'm going to try and set up periods on the YouTube thing so that you guys can fast forward out of all this boring crap. But if you guys want to see a demonstration of me untwisting a stitch over and over again, you can watch through the whole video. All right, we're on to the last one, which had considerably fewer stitches on it, which is good news. So we're almost done. Get this untangled a little bit. All right. And this one, twisted, a little harder to tell. This one's twisted. Okay, fix, fix, fix. That's straight. This one's twisted. And when you're actually going to knit with the stitch, the fabric will tell you. It'll feel tight if the stitch is twisted, and it won't feel right. You'll have to put a lot more tension on it than you normally would. This one, I didn't catch all of the yarn, so make sure you catch all of the yarn when you're putting it onto the needle. Twisted, 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 and this one is, it's a little harder to see because of the stitch marker. It is also twisted. Okay. So, zoom out. Back out. And we have picked up all our stitches and we can continue on. I did say that I would give you a demonstration if you had dropped a stitch. So why don't I take this back a couple, and we're going to just unhook a stitch there and say that I had picked this up when I was picking up my stitches and had dropped, and it could drop several along the way. So let me zoom in, show you what that looks like. Get this in the center here. So I have a stitch, and then I've got a loose thread in the back. Zoom it in a little bit more. Yep, there we go. So there's correction sticks, but what I've figured out over time, and let me see if I can do this live on camera. This will be funny if I can't. Is I can just easily do that with my needles. Let me show you that again. Let's make sure I get it in the center here. Drop the stitch. And it can be with slippier yarn, it can be a little harder to do. But what I've figured out is take the thread or the yarn that's dropped, put it back onto the needle, bring this over that stitch, and now you've corrected it. No need to go and get a separate tool, nothing. One more demonstration of it. So drop the stitch, let's get that dropped. Okay, bring the thread up, the loose thread up onto the needle, okay, like that. And then you just drag this over the top of it and you've got your stitch back, okay? So I'm now ready to keep knitting. I'm gonna put in my stitch marker. It shows me the start of the round. First stitch is a purl. I know I've got 84 stitches, so and I'm showing where my decreases are. So I'm going to knit 2 and then put on one of my stitch markers. And then the next step is I knit, zooming back out, knit 20, and I'll put on another stitch marker and I'll continue on my way, making sure that I've got all my stitches in place. If you find that as you're going along that you have dropped something, or you can get one of those crochet hooks to pick up your stitches and bring it back up onto the needle. But always make sure that you've got the number of stitches you are anticipating to have at the end of your round, so that you're not getting further up and realizing there's something missing and you've got to drop stitch 20 rows back. If it's in the middle of the sleeve, it's not a big deal. You can just pick up stitches as you go along. It's where you get into these decreases that you could have a problem. You can always put in another stitch, or you can just live with it and realize that it's one of those things that makes it a handmade item. So that's all I wanted to show today. Really easy to just rip back and start all over again. Nothing to be nervous about. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps you guys out, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.